The film begins with a character named Guy Montag, mesmerized by a flickering flame before he extinguishes it. The following morning, he takes his prescribed eye drops and converses with an AI in his room. In this dystopian future, after a second civil war, the United States is ruled by an authoritarian regime called the Ministry. Under this new order, firemen no longer put out fires, but instead burn every book they find. Society is provided with a controlled version of the internet called the Nine, offering only government-approved reading material. Later, Montag and his fellow firemen, led by Captain Beatty, engage in a friendly scuffle. The team then visits a school to educate children about their enemies, a group called the Eels, who believe in spreading books which the regime claims would destabilize society. The Ministry permits only a few books, like The Lighthouse and Moby Dick, claiming that all other books cause illness and insanity. The children are delighted to learn that nearly all the books in the country have already been destroyed. Montag demonstrates the destruction process for the students, who eagerly watch. Soon after, the firemen receive an alert about eel activity. They mobilize, chanting as they ride to the location on arrival. The eels scramble to upload as much data as possible before being raided. In the chaos, Montag apprehends an eel wielding a knife, but quickly subdues him. He spots a server uploading hundreds of books and destroys it within minutes. The scene is broadcast across the country, and Montag proudly shows off the contraband they've seized. The public celebrates their success. Montag uses a strange device on the captured eels, erasing their citizenship and marking them as outcasts. He revels in the moment, becoming something of a celebrity as he sets the confiscated electronics ablaze, much to the delight of Captain Beatty and the cheering crowds. However, during this display, Montag experiences a strange flashback. The scene shifts to Montag packing up his flamethrower at the armory, where he meets up with Captain Beatty. Together, they go to visit a captured eel named Clarice, who is also an informant. Sentenced to 6 years as an eel, Clarice cooperates by providing information in exchange for a reduced sentence. Despite this, she remains an outcast, unable to participate in society's activities. With Clarice's information, Montag and Beatty head out to track down suspected bookkeepers. At the next scene, Montag and Captain Beatty spot a couple recording a video. One of the men drops a tape, and the duo watches another recording in which an older man talks about the past, recalling how there used to be thousands of words written on paper for journalism, and how firemen were originally tasked with extinguishing fires, not starting them. Captain Beatty coldly tells the old man that his lies will die along with his generation. Meanwhile, the media covers their supposed heroism, once again portraying Captain Beatty and Montag as protectors of society. Later, as they relax, Captain Beatty opens up to Montag, telling him how his father was a true hero, a fireman who lost his life fighting against the eels. Beatty took Montag under his wing after his father's death, raising him like a brother. Elsewhere, Clarice secretly meets with a contact, trading a music player for information on a drop location for books. When Montag returns home, he asks his AI whether firemen ever used to put out fires. The AI responds with the regime's fabricated history, stating that Benjamin Franklin was the founder of the fire department, and anything else is a lie spread by the eels. Meanwhile, Captain Beatty, in his own home, dismisses his AI's reminder to take his eye drops and orders it to go dark. He then opens a safe, revealing a pen and some paper, and writes a dark, poetic message before setting it on fire. Back at Clarice's place, she helps a neighbor by giving her some milk for her baby, then returns to tinkering with various items. Meanwhile, Montag sits in quiet reflection by the ocean, and Captain Beatty continues writing his poetry as the sun rises. Like Beatty, Montag tells his AI to go dark, and then pulls out the tape he took earlier. He opens a vent, revealing broken remnants of things he has secretly collected over the years. That night, the firemen head out to the location that Clarice tipped them off to. Upon entering the house, they find a woman sitting silently, reading a book. They stare at her, and Montag tries to get her to stand, but she remains quiet and motionless. The other firemen search the house and uncover a horrifying discovery: thousands of books hidden inside. Montag and Captain Beatty are stunned. Beatty declares that this will be the biggest burn of their careers, perhaps the burn of the century. As they prepare to act, Captain Beatty reveals that he has only witnessed such a scene once before. His tone shifts and he begins speaking in a way that suggests he might have read books himself at some point. He asks Montag if he would like to hold one of the books. Montag, feeling a growing sense of unease and guilt, hesitates. Beatty encourages him, urging Montag to open it and read. Montag opens the book as Captain Beatty watches, but Beatty quickly shuts it, rattling off a list of author names and their works. He ends by claiming that all of it is insanity to the people. He tells Montag to take one last look, as future generations, including Montag's grandchildren, will never even know what a book is. Unbeknownst to Beatty, Montag discreetly slips a book under his jacket as the firemen begin to gather the books into a pile. A strange memory flickers through Montag's mind as they douse the pile with flammable liquid. The woman, still sitting quietly, is told to leave, but she refuses. Instead, she pulls out her own matches, ignites the pile of books, and calmly stands atop them. As the flames engulf her, she utters the word "omnis" before dying. The shocking scene goes viral on social media, and the public watches the spectacle unfold in real time. Later that night, the ministry scrubs the word "omnis" from the video and replaces it with the word "coward" to control the narrative. When Captain Beatty is informed about this, he's also told that the ministry wants to know the meaning of the word "omnis." Montag watches the news broadcast and sees how the ministry manipulates the footage. As he heads home, Beatty catches up with him to discuss Montag's hesitation during the raid. Montag reassures him it won't happen again, and Beatty, viewing Montag as the son he never had, reminds him that he was the youngest cadet ever accepted and that nothing should get in the way of his career. Montag returns home, turns off his AI, and begins reading the book he smuggled out loud. After a while, the AI unexpectedly responds, acknowledging that it has been listening and keeping their conversation private. The AI begins questioning him, but Montag grows frustrated and storms off. Meanwhile, Captain Beatty resumes his writing, and intriguingly pens something about Montag. Montag, restless, sneaks through the city to meet with Clarice. He follows her for a while until she notices him and pulls a knife. He asks her about the woman who set herself on fire, saying he can still smell her burning. He also demands to know the meaning of the word "omnis." But Clarice remains silent. Montag then reveals the book he smuggled, and Clarice's demeanor changes. She takes the book and the two of them head back to her place. Montag, still anxious, watches as Clarice turns on the lamps and begins reading aloud. As she reads, Montag starts to understand the truth, that the ministry is controlling people's thoughts. He questions Clarice about Benjamin Franklin, and she explains that he was indeed the founder of the firemen, but their original purpose was to extinguish fires, not start them. She also reveals that the eye drops he takes make him forget his childhood memories. Furthering the regime's control, Clarice continues to enlighten Montag, and as the night goes on, his entire view of the world begins to change, shaking the foundations of everything he thought he knew. Meanwhile, Captain Beatty is informed that Omnis will be declassified to enlist the public's help in eradicating both the eels and their dangerous technology. That night, Montag recalls a childhood memory of his father giving him a book, and defying routine, he skips his eye drops the next morning. At the firehouse, Beatty briefs the firemen on a shocking development. The eels have converted all of humanity's knowledge and history into a single piece of DNA, which they call Omnis. This DNA contains not just books, but also music, movies, and more, an archive of culture. The eels plan to smuggle this Omnis DNA into Canada, where it will be released globally, and the firemen have one night to stop it. Beatty declares that they will burn the city before the eels succeed. As the night falls, the eels are hunted mercilessly, with the news broadcasting the threat of Omnis to rally public support. The ministry demands the eels hand over the DNA, while the scenes shift between Montag brutally raiding the eels and secretly reading with Clarice. Despite the firemen's pressure, the eels refuse to reveal the location of Omnis. Captain Beatty, growing increasingly ruthless, threatens to kill the eels if they don't comply. Montag, torn between duty and conscience, helps Clarice escape from Beatty's grasp, allowing her to flee the burning city. As they part ways, Clarice says goodbye to a close friend, determined to find safety beyond the flames. Later, during another raid, Montag comes across a father and his child hiding. In a moment of rebellion, he allows them to remain concealed, but Captain Beatty notices and silently watches as the man and child are arrested. This brings back painful memories for Montag. He recalls how his own father was killed by firemen for possessing books. Captain Beatty confronts Montag, lecturing him on the gravity of his betrayal. Fed up, Montag removes his gloves and declares that he wants to quit, but Beatty refuses, revealing that he has already submitted Montag's name to be promoted as the next fire captain. He tells Montag that he's invested 16 years in him and won't let that go to waste. When Montag expresses his confusion and disillusionment, Beatty coldly threatens to put him on trial for treason and have him incinerated if he quits. He instructs Montag to take a break and return the next day. On his way home, Montag is spotted by Douglas, another fireman, as he gets into a car full of eels. Douglas immediately reports this to Captain Beatty. The eels in the car are suspicious of Montag and uncomfortable with his presence. They bag him and transport him to a hidden compound, where he is finally unmasked in front of Clarice's mentors. These mentors are part of a group that has each memorized an entire book to preserve knowledge. The mentors question Montag's loyalty and why they should trust him. In response, Montag delivers an impassioned speech about his childhood, his father's death, and his desire to change the oppressive system. Moved by his words, the eels tell Montag that they have an important mission for him involving the Omnis DNA. But first, he must pass a test. He must kill his fellow fireman. Montag is deeply shocked by this request, but despite his fear and hesitation, agrees to take on the task. Montag approaches his fellow firemen, ready to kill them as part of his test, but is abruptly stopped and told he has passed. Now welcomed into the eels team, he learns about a young man named Clifford, the owner of a rare bird with a unique DNA code derived from thousands of books. A project completed by Clifford's mother, a brilliant geneticist. Canadian scientists hope to replicate the Omnis DNA and introduce it into animals around the world, spreading knowledge globally through nature. Clifford himself has memorized over 13,000 books, and Montag is astounded when he tests the young man's knowledge. Montag is then assigned a critical mission: to steal a transponder from the fire department. This device is essential for the Canadian scientists to track and recover Clifford's bird once it is released. Unbeknownst to Montag, Captain Beatty is struggling with the knowledge of his betrayal. Montag returns to the firehouse, unaware that he's been discovered. He sneaks into the armory to steal the transponder, but before he can leave, Captain Beatty calls his name. The two have a tense conversation. Beatty reveals that, like Montag, he is also consumed by questions and desires. But he chooses to walk in darkness with his fellow firemen rather than face the unknown alone. The other firemen join them, surrounding Montag, and hand him the very book he had been hiding. Beatty forces Montag to read it aloud as he sets each page on fire. Montag, filled with conflicting emotions, declares that he wants to burn and is ultimately allowed back into the team. Their next raid takes an unexpected turn when they stop in front of Montag's own house, with the media broadcasting the event live to the public. Inside, Montag finds a pile of books and sees his AI projecting his face across the country. Beatty hands him a flamethrower, ordering him to burn the books. Reluctantly, Montag obeys, but as he watches the flames, memories flood back. Memories of his childhood and the moment when his father was taken by none other than Captain Beatty himself. Invigorated by the fire, Montag sets his entire house ablaze. In a symbolic act, he even burns himself in the process. As he stumbles outside, his citizenship is revoked, marking him as a complete outcast. Another fireman steps forward, accusing Montag of having been seen in a car with eels earlier. With the firemen preparing to search for Clarice, Montag suddenly strikes one of them, steals his flamethrower, and aims it at the group. Captain Beatty, daring him to act, is caught off guard when Montag actually pulls the trigger, killing one of the firemen. In the ensuing chaos, Montag sets a massive fire and flees into the streets. Beatty, shocked by Montag's transformation, declares him a fugitive and the highest threat to society, announcing this over the airwaves. Montag escapes and finds Clarice, showing her the transponder he stole. Together, they head toward the eels' compound. However, Beatty learns of Montag's location and sends a helicopter to track them down. When the firemen arrive at the compound, they arrest the eels and set the building ablaze. Montag reaches the compound but stays hidden, observing from a distance as Clarice helps some of her friends hide from the firemen. Watching carefully, Montag notices a barn in the distance and decides to make a run for it, attempting to remain unnoticed. However, he's spotted mid-sprint. Inside the barn, he finds Clifford lying dead. But the bird, the key to the eels' mission, is still alive. Above them, there's an opening in the roof, a path to freedom. With no time to waste, Montag attaches the transponder to the bird, ensuring it can be tracked by the Canadian scientists. Just as the transponder activates, Captain Beatty enters, flamethrower in hand, and aims it at Montag. He orders Montag to stop, his voice thick with anger and betrayal. But Montag, resolute and fearless, looks death in the eyes and releases the bird into the sky. The bird soars safely through the barn's opening, flying to freedom. Captain Beatty, heartbroken and furious, stares at Montag, the man he once considered a son, his heir. Unable to contain his rage, he screams in frustration as he presses the trigger, engulfing Montag in flames. Montag dies in the inferno, but not before ensuring the bird's escape. As the morning sun rises, we follow the bird as it flies through vast open landscapes, gliding over mountains, forests, and rivers. Eventually, it joins with thousands of other birds, carrying humanity's knowledge with it, ensuring that the legacy of books, music, and culture will live on, despite the oppressive forces that sought to destroy it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.